My name is Alex LeBlanc. I'm Executive Director of the New Brunswick Multicultural Council. To quickly start, I'd like to thank the organizers of P2P, the co-chairs, Dr. Esses and Jean, for the huge amount of time they put into this conference. And I also want to recognize there are many New Brunswickers in this room, and I work with them on a daily basis. They have kind of inspired me and have given me the chance to talk about this collaboration, really. This initiative is a collaboration with all of them. I had an optional introduction this morning. I wasn't sure whether I'd share it, but I think I'm going to, and it's going to eat into my time, but maybe I'll have to finish my presentation in the hallways with you after. You know, with the presentation this morning, I found myself really struck by the complexity and the heaviness of this topic of immigration and the politicization of immigration. And so when you talk about competing forces, sure, AI and roboticization and all these things are making it more complex, the labor market, but so too is this kind of populism. And so I see this presentation and what this initiative being somewhere in the middle of those two worlds, the populist kind of threat, the political license for immigration, and how do we manage this in a practical way to support employers to meet real demands in their businesses. I'm going to share an excerpt from a speech that was prepared by Dominic Barton. He's a well-known Canadian business leader and was advisor to Barack Obama and recently the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. He's done a lot of thinking about this, and I think it may take me a moment to read it, but I think it's very topical. The current global environment requires especially a strong leadership. It is a time of rapid change and uncertainty that is largely being shaped by four global forces. The first is the evolving dynamics of economic growth, marked by a shift in the world's economic center of gravity back to Asia. The second is the accelerating pace of industry disruption, and we'll hear more about that this morning. Technology is disrupting every aspect of our lives, and all companies are having to adapt and become technology companies. The third force is an aging of the world's population. By 2050, the number of people worldwide who are 80 or older will quadruple to 400 million. This has significant implications on workforce participation, there will be less, and therefore country productivity and GDP growth. As we age, we become more expensive, and this aging of the population has significant implications for government spending. Finally, I think we're all well aware of a search for a new societal deal. The current system isn't working for a large portion of the population. There is a rising inequality and increasing job displacement driven by trade and particularly technology. These four global forces combine to create a very exciting and challenging time. And he goes on to say, with this broad context, we can start getting into what does a successful leader look like with all of these powerful forces at play. And he says, one of my favorite quotes about leadership is from former US President Theodore Roosevelt. In 1910, Roosevelt gave a speech at Sorbonne entitled Citizenship in a Republic. He says, it is not the critic who counts, not the man or woman who points out how the strong man or woman stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man or woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deed, who spends himself or herself in a worthy cause. And I wanted to mention this because I see this room as people in the arena, in a very important arena for Canada. It's an arena battling for our identity as Canadians, for social license, for multiculturalism, and really for our economy and our own self-interest when we start looking at things like healthcare. Mireille's point earlier this morning about engaging political parties, I think that's critical. That's an arena we have to be a part of. And also to Doug's point earlier about these communities and these spaces on the maps where there's virtually no immigration. It's, I think, incumbent on us to start to kind of create conditions for immigration in those regions, because those spaces with little immigration present a threat to the political license. So now the speech, but I thought that introduction was important and gives us a lot to think about. The New Brunswick Multicultural Council is an umbrella organization that represents 17 different organizations in the province of New Brunswick, 14 settlement service providers, and 3 ethno-cultural groups. The initiative I'm going to talk to you about this morning is New Conversations. We wanted to bring new conversation into smaller communities in New Brunswick about the economy, immigration, and the role that communities will play in making this successful. For decades, New Brunswick's economy has been fueled by a steady flow of new workers. You'll note in this graph that from 1978 to about 2008, there was a continuous growth in our labor force. Obviously in part because of boomers entering the workforce, but also women participating more actively in the workforce. So this contributed to more people, which gave employers the advantage of having a surplus of labor. They could grow their business operations because the workers were there to do so. In 2008 to 2013, the size of our labor force basically flatlined in New Brunswick. And since 2013, we've been in structural decline. Over the next 10 years, there will be about 110,000 retirements in our province, and our public schools will graduate 76,000 students. And my president was quoted recently saying, "That's not complicated math." Of course, it is much more complex than that, and there are other factors at play, but it points to the structural challenges that we're facing in New Brunswick. What is at stake? Based on trends, it looks like New Brunswick, if things don't change, could lose 30,000 plus workers in the next 10 years. This represents billions in economic activity and hundreds of millions of dollars in lost tax revenues. Meanwhile, public services and demand for public services are increasing. Healthcare spending will rise dramatically over the years ahead. Today, 65,000 people in New Brunswick are 75 years or older. In 15 years, we expect that number to double. And to put into context, the cost for healthcare per person below 65, I mean, there are different ranges per year, but basically it will more than double. So this population could be adding close to $1 billion to our health budget over the next 15 years. This is a chart that we shared during our provincial New Conversations tour to educate communities about where growth in our labor market is coming from in Canada. Across the country, between 2013 and 2017, there were almost 600,000 new people joining the workforce through immigration. The Canadian-born population actually saw a decline. So all net growth in our labor force across Canada came from immigration. In New Brunswick, same kind of reality. We saw a loss of 15,000 Canadian-born people in our workforce, but immigration's already making an important difference in kind of ebbing that or turning that tide. Also, to kind of put into context for the difference between our workforce and our labor market and what the realities across the country, fewer than 5% of workers in New Brunswick's contact centers or call centers are first-generation immigrants. In Vancouver, it's 47%. Toronto, it's 50%. These regions have this available labor to grow their businesses and run their operations. It's not there in New Brunswick. 3% of all workers in manufacturing sectors in our province are immigrants. In Toronto, it's 76%, and across Canada, 31%. So in a way, our industries that are occupying the manufacturing, our businesses in manufacturing and call centers are at a competitive disadvantage in a way because the workforce isn't there for them to grow. And the purpose for our tour was really the political license for this. This was a poll done 2 years ago by Corporate Research Associates that essentially says 2/3 of our province believe, given our cultural and economic conditions, that we should have the same numbers of immigrants or fewer. So the imperative is overwhelming, but the license isn't there. New Brunswick has 4.6% foreign-born population or residents in our province, in contrast with 21.9% across Canada. I'm sure you're well aware of Canada's numbers. There was another poll done recently asking New Brunswickers if we were more equally diverse or less diverse than the rest of the country. 48% of our province believes that we are more or equally diverse compared to other parts of Canada. And Don Mills comically commented, apparently they never left home, and that's quite possibly the truth. But this is why we have to get out into communities and engage individuals in this issue. So we set out on a tour to 15 different communities to raise awareness about the demographic and labor market realities we face in our province, to engage employers in the option of using immigration to address labor force shortages, and to engage the community, which is where a lot of the really interesting things happened during the tour, engage the community in what role they could play. This is a quick map of where we went, 15 different communities. New Brunswick's largely kind of known for 3 cities. We intentionally went to smaller regions, and actually when I saw Doug Saunders' maps earlier, it highlighted for me that this is an important part of our strategy, is we have to go to regions where there isn't much immigration. Many of these regions would have very, very low immigrant populations, maybe 1%, 2% of their overall population. So there is a conversation required in those areas. We couldn't do it alone, and part of the social license is going to be getting people, maybe people who are not traditionally vocal on this topic, into the conversation. So we reached out and engaged over 100 partner organizations. Every single one of the 15 communities had a small team of partners, the municipality, the chamber, and other notable groups in the area. And that was important as well for getting people in the room and giving them a feeling like this is a conversation that's important and that they should take seriously. So we pitched the tour as our province being at a crossroads. We have the choice between managing the challenges of growth or managing the challenges of decline. Both will come with challenges. We kicked off this is more of a journey map for how we tackled this. We engaged 60 organizations, had about 80 people in a room, and we had discussions similar to the one that we had this morning about, look, this is complex. There's a political reality here. There's a labor market reality. How do we penetrate this and reach New Brunswickers and resonate with them how important this is? We engaged the partners, and for each region, we developed a unique labor market and demographic profile. So this was kind of a report, about a 12-page report that talked about their local community, what the average age was in comparison to other parts of the province and the country, what the average age of entrepreneurs is. In New Brunswick, about 40% of our entrepreneurs are 55 years or older. This is a serious concern for who's going to be the future entrepreneurs in our province. So we wanted to get this kind of local data in the hands of influencers and the general public so they could build support for this. We hosted 14 events in 5 weeks. There were kind of evening town halls, very dynamic conversations. Every event involved a presentation from a provincial economist who shared the data, the facts, and we talked about how important the facts are in this. But we also had panelists from each community, employers and newcomers, talk about what their experience is with this. And new employers are saying, look, you may not believe it, but I need immigrants in order to support my business. So if you want me to stay in the community, then, and we're hearing from nursing homes, very compelling when you hear a nursing home saying, we contemplated closing our doors because we can't provide the care that we feel we should. So the employer testimonials and the newcomer testimonials were very compelling. Following the tour, I'd love to talk with you more about this, but I'll just highlight a couple things. The grassroots initiatives that are coming up, came up following the tour, were very interesting. 2 of our mayors had really no involvement in immigration before, and they stepped up after the event and said, I need to do something to welcome newcomers. So they've launched annual Welcome to Miramichi and St. Stephen barbecues to say, look, we're going to have a big event, we're going to get the community together, and we're going to celebrate that you've chosen our communities. Some regions are developing strategic plans to address their demographic challenges. Multicultural Association is emerging in one community that there was no service provider. Communities are being built. So our goal with the tour really from the beginning wasn't to come in with an answer, it was to come in with a problem and start a conversation. And communities are really rallying around that in the province, and I'd love to share more with you throughout the day today if you're curious about some of the other interesting results. Thank you.